scripts that is loaded up, okay? AE scripts is basically a repository for people who have written little mini programs called scripts that you can use inside of After Effects. And a lot of these are free. If it worked, you'd be able to see all the awesome scripts, but they don't have it there. It worked literally like 5 minutes ago. So what it is basically if you're like, I wish I could do this in After Effects, chances are someone has written a script that allows you to do that in After Effects, okay? So one of the things, see it now, it seems to be maybe. Nope, it's still waiting. Yeah, their main page seems to be down, but every other page seems to be working okay. So let's say I have something like this. All right. Now all of these bars are evenly spaced. Also, the transparency on them is gradually declining. Okay, so it starts off on the far left with 100% opacity and then gradually lessens the opacity as it goes. Now, for me to go into After Effects and do that manually would take me a long time to do. But on AE scripts, they have a bunch of scripts that allow us to edit this stuff rather quickly. So just to show you how this thing works, I'm just going to reset this one that I have. Oops, not that. There we go. Okay. And I'll put him back at the origin. All right, so this is all I have is just a little animation on here. It just like blips up, just bloop, like that. That's all it does. Okay. Then I'm going to take this one and duplicate it a bunch of times. There we go. 16 seems to be a magic number with this specific one. Then I'm going to grab all of these. I'm going to go to my script, and you'll see there's already a bunch of scripts in here. After Effects comes with all of these scripts minus this distribute one. That's the one I just downloaded. And so if I go to that, I get this box. And look how in this box I can just take my X direction and slide it, and what it's going to do is automatically offset each one of these 98, 100 units to the right. Okay? So it automatically moves each one of those 100 units. That way they're all, again, evenly spaced. If I need to go further, I can open up the slider range and say my minimum is sure negative 100. The maximum, let's put it at like 150. That way I can slide it a little bit further. There we go. Now they all fill up. I can also go to my opacity, and I could knock the opacity down. By taking this down to 3, what it's going to do is the first one is a full 100%. Then this is 97, 94, 91, and so on, all the way down. So it's much easier to do something like this using the script. Okay? Now we still have to understand how this is working so that we can do this stuff on our own if we need to, or work around it, or reset it if possible. We also have things like random position. So if I take the Y random, bloop, now they're all kind of randomly spaced in the Y direction. If I reset this, you see they don't go back to where they were. The reason they don't go back to where they were is because basically that's just a random number. I've said don't be random anymore, it doesn't matter. It's just going to put it wherever it feels like it. Okay? So if I need to reset that, I just go back to my position, and then I can grab the Y position and just reset those to, it wasn't 0, but I just set it to 0. Oops, I reset all of them to 0. I'd have to separate them, I don't care about it that much. Now I can't even undo it just because of how it does the stuff that it does. So I have to be very careful with doing this kind of thing because I don't want to obviously screw it up. And you can see I'm going back really, really far, and it's gradually putting them closer and closer together. So close. And then I'm eventually going to run out of undos, and After Effects is going to say nope. So then very simply I just take this, delete all these, reset the number 1. And then reduplicate. And then open up my script. Okay? So there's lots of different scripts that are available. Now, when you go to the site, I don't think it's opened yet. Nope, it still isn't open. I click there, it's going to not do anything here. Yep. When you go to the site, it basically just like, imagine there's like thousands of scripts here. You find one that you like, and it says name your price, and it says like 15 bucks or 10 bucks or 100 bucks. Name your price, whatever you want to pay for it. So you want to pay 0, put 0, and you'll be able to download the thing for free. Okay, so they're pretty cool. Some of them are like locked in. Some of the people spend weeks and months developing these scripts, and they're not going to just give it away for free. So those ones you have to pay for. But there's a lot on here you can get for free. Like on mine, downloads. I can't get to my downloads because the website's not working right. But anyway, once you've downloaded one, you'll have this area that says downloads, and then you can just download all of these different scripts. So like on mine, I have 5 or 6 different scripts that I constantly use. Another one, let me see if I can get to it from Google. Download. My downloads. Yep, there we go. So it remembers all the ones you've done. So here, last year in November, I downloaded one called Ease and Whiz. I downloaded another one called Reposition Anchor Point. Another one called Decompose Text. Another one, Distribute Layers, which is what we just saw. And then I just set up one for aligning layers. Okay? So you could save all these things. And again, these are all free things you can use to just enhance what you're doing, make things easier for you while you're working in here. Okay? Now you'll notice something about this, and this is one of the reasons I wanted to show this today, is that as I start using some other scripts, do you see anything weird about our manipulator? There's 3 arrows, right? Okay, so what that means is that it's put this object into an actual 3D layer. Okay, so After Effects actually doesn't have 3D. It has what's called 2.5D, meaning, if you remember your definitions, it's fake 3D. Okay, so what it does is it has this thing where if I make something smaller and push it back, it seems like it's in 3D, right? And then if I move it bigger and reposition it, it could look like it's actually coming towards the camera. So it's kind of like what After Effects does. So without the 3D box right here clicked, you'll see that it goes back to being just a 2D box. Now again, that's important because there are certain things we can do in 3D that we can't do in 2D. Okay, so I'm going to delete all of the, oops, not all of them, one. There we go. So here's my one box that I have here, and all this thing does is just go bloop like that. Okay, so now here's some stuff that I can do inside of 3D. Let's say that I wanted to make this a 3D object. If I go to my position, if I go to my rotation, if I go to my scale, you'll see that all of these have the same default attributes. There's 2 of these values, there's 2 of these values, and there's, well, 1 value there, really. If I click the 3D button here, that's what this guy is, you'll see that I get more stuff. Okay, I get a position that has 3 values. I get a scale that has 3 values, I get an orientation that has 3, and I get X, Y, and Z rotations. Okay? And if I open up my anchor point also, my anchor point would also have 3 different values. Alright, so now this is important because this is what's going to allow us to do what we need to do in 3D. So let's say I want to take this little blippy thing and I wanted to make 24 of them or something. Okay? So if I duplicate one, I can scoot it over. That's same thing we've done before, okay? Just duplicating and just moving things over. All right, but now let's say I want it to look like there was actually some depth here, so there actually was some 3D-ness. In order for me to do this in a 2D mode, I would have to scale the entire thing down, and I would have to reposition it so it looked like it was actually behind it. Well, with 3D, I don't need to do that. I'm going to grab all 3 of these, and I'm going to duplicate them. And I'm just going to grab this blue one. See, as I hover my mouse over the blue, it says Z. That means I'm pushing it back, like away from the camera. We're looking through a camera. I'm going to push it away from it. So I'm going to click and drag. And you'll see now that those items, let me push it back a bit further. Now those items look like they're actually like further in the distance. So if I rewind this and play it, okay. Now, realistically, it could look like, okay, well, those are just smaller and sitting next to it. If I wanted to take that animation and make it smaller and move it next to it, I basically have to reset all my keyframes on those things because my scales are now shorter, right? But they're not because they're just back there. Now, I could also take any solid. So if I made a solid here, Sure. I make it 3D. And then I go to rotation, and I just rotate it 90 degrees. There we go. And then I move it down. And then I'm going to scale it really big. Okay. So now again, we're kind of making this feel like more like it's 3D. Now here's where it's really going to look 3D. Once I go to my camera tool and I start to spin around, oops, I had to make a camera first. Layer, new camera, there we go. And then I start to move around, you can see how now it actually feels like we're more in a 3D world, okay? So this is where the 3D part of this really comes in handy, because we can use this as a way to move around our scene. We can actually build like a fake 2D scene and move around it. There's a bunch of different options here: orbiting, tracking, and tracking XY, which is left, right, up, down, and then tracking Z, which is zooming in and out. So you see how I can basically like zoom past these ones and go to those ones, or I can switch to this XY and just go side to side. And you'll see how we get the parallax of this. We get the illusion that the front objects and the back objects are moving differently, making it feel like the back objects are further away, okay? And we can set keyframes on all this, and it's really, really neat, all right? So eventually we're gonna get more into this kind of thing, all right? For right now, we're gonna baby step it. And our first thing we're gonna do is just set up some very basic 3D stuff. Okay, so I'm just gonna make a new comp. Nothing is different with the comp, it's just the same old stuff. Under my rectangle tool here, I'm going to draw a box, okay? And what I want to do is I want to basically have this box look like it's swinging, okay? Not this way. This is also going to be wrong. Not this way, but I want it to look like it's swinging like at the camera, okay? So I want it to look like there's some perspective on it. So in order for me to do that, the first thing I need to do is reposition my anchor point. My anchor point right now is like a crazy spot. It needs to be like where it would pivot from. So I'm going to hit Y, I'm going to click on my shape layer, and I'm going to move it over here. Hold Control and click on it. Now this here, the ability to do this wasn't available before. That's why at one point I downloaded a Move Anchor Point tool, because they didn't have something that allowed you to snap directly to it. So now we have that, so we really don't need that tool. So now when I rotate it, you'll see it rotates like this. Still not giving me that perspective of it looking like it's rotating towards the camera. That's where 3D comes in. So I click the little 3D button, and if I look at this, imagine each one of these arrows is basically a bar, okay? So if I had a bar where the Y is, imagine how that thing would rotate kind of like around, like it's spinning this way, okay? If I had the Z, it would spin basically what we saw, that rotating around like this. And if we had the X, that should give us more like a hinge of where it is, okay? Now, I'm looking at each one of these, and I know what each one means. Here's the trick. You have the red, you have a green, and you have a blue. Red is always X, green is always Y, and blue is always Z, okay? Those are the three different directions you're going to be moving. So you have RGB, X, Y, Z. That's an easy way to remember those. So if I go to my X rotation, I'll zoom out a smidge, and I rotate it, look how now, without doing anything fancy, I'm actually getting the perspective of this thing actually swinging towards the camera and away from the camera, okay? So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to rotate it backwards, like that. I'm going to set a key. I'm going to pull it up a little bit, and then I'm going to rotate it, oops, the other way. I'm going to go up a little bit more. I'm going to rotate it back. I'm going to go up a little bit more, rotate it forward. All right, there we go. So now if we look at this, okay, it's a bit slow. Let me fix that. Just bring these keyframes in. Bring these keyframes in. There we go. Okay. Now the reason I have all these other keyframes on there is because I want it to feel like this thing is actually not just going like boom like this, but I want it to feel like it's swaying past it and then coming back and then coming back and then coming to rest. Okay, so that's why I have all those extra keyframes in there to give it that feeling of it actually swaying. All right, so now all of this is possible with 3D layers. If I had this as a 2D layer, I'm not going to say there's no way I'd be able to do it, but it'd be very tricky to try to create this type of angle on a 2D layer to make it appear that it's actually 3D, because that's what's doing it. The perspective of that camera is what's causing it to look like it's 3D. And the same thing here, you can see the perspective of it there. Now here's a cool part that I can do. I'm going to go to where it's at rest. I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm just going to scoot it down. So I'm just going to grab the Y and scoot it down. Then I'm going to duplicate it again, scoot it down again. Duplicate it again, scoot it down again. And one more time, and scoot it down again. All right, so now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these. Cool. So now if I rewind and hit play, we get this. Okay, not terribly exciting. All right, so what I want to do is I want to link all of these things together. So if this was like a sign, when the top one falls down, then the next one would fall, then the next one, then the next one, and then the next one. So I'm going to use parenting, and we've kind of talked about that a little bit before. This guy over here, I can connect this layer to that layer, this layer to that layer, this layer to that layer, this layer to that layer. Imagine that there's chains or ropes or something holding these things together. In what order are they connected is how I'm going to parent them. So my bottom layer here, which is 5, would be connected to 4. Now just for my own sanity, I don't like 5 is here on top, over here it's on the bottom. That confuses me. Okay, I like to have, if it's on the bottom here, it's on the bottom there. So I'm just going to reorder these so that they're in the same order. There you go. Now with 3D layers, it doesn't matter. When we look at what layers on top here, what layers on top here, it doesn't matter because 3D is 3D. If I have this container and it's dripping, if I have this pen and it's way over here and I have another layer that's right here, it doesn't matter the layer order because realistically I could pass these two up. Okay, I don't have to do anything with layers. It's literally just moving objects around is what's going to do it. So for organization, keep them like that. All right, so I'm going to take number 5 and I'm going to link him to number 4. So I just go to the parent and say now you're linked to 4. And then 4 I want to be linked to 3. And then 3 I want to be linked to 2. And then 2 I want to be linked to 1. And 1 is just on his own. Okay? So now if we rewind this, you'll see that all of them go away. Okay? Because of the fact that they're all linked now, they roll back up. So now when I hit play, they're all going to like unfold. So there was 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 5. Okay? Now what I can do is just offset them a little bit. So instead of all these happening at the same time, because basically what's happening is they're all rotating at the same time, it looks kind of weird. What I want to do is thinking about how the sign would actually work. So the top piece of this would come down. And as the top piece comes down and goes like this, then the piece underneath it kind of flings up a little bit. And then the piece under that flings up a little bit. Okay? So all I have to do is just offset them. So number 1 is my top, so he's always going to go first. Number 2, I'll just scoot back a little bit. Number 3, I'll scoot back a little bit. Number 4, I'll scoot back a little bit. And number 5, I'll scoot back a little bit. Okay? So now these all have an offset. Their offset is all based on time. So what that means is their animation just happens later. Okay? So now that feels a little bit more natural. Okay? Do you see how now that the motion of the, let me just set my thing to right there. The motion of each of these feels better as it's coming down. For the people who are in my animation class, think of the sticks, right? When we did the stick animation, it's the same exact thing. Okay, all we're doing is just offsetting them. Now it does look weird that these things are kind of popping into place. So another way to kind of get around that is to just pull these back. Okay, now what I'm not doing is I'm not actually moving those back. All I'm doing is extending that solid so that it's still there. Okay, and you can see that right here, you see the little dashed lines right here? That means that basically you're just extending that layer out. I'm not moving the layer, I'm just extending it so it exists, okay? So when we rewind this, they're still there, but their animation's not gonna happen until I told them to happen. And then we get to this. Now, with anything like this, there's always this like little sweet spot of where everything's gonna make sense and where it's gonna work out. Today is a lucky day. It worked out pretty good the first time, all right? Every day I'm not so lucky. So I'm gonna go and just offset these even further, and I'll show you how if you don't have these timed out perfectly, how it just looks like a mess. It just looks really, really weird. So you see how it was kind of like jittery at the end? Like right there? Let's go even further. Let's go here, here. So I'm just pushing these even further back. Okay, and you can see there definitely we get a weird jittery movement, okay? So there is this sweet spot, and sometimes it's moving it over 2 frames, sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 1. You just have to play with it and see, and it's literally just moving the layers. Once we've set up the 1 rotation and we've moved it and offset and done our stuff, it's cool. All right, so now the next part of this is, you know, this first thing that I'm showing here, this is your warm-up. This is the introduction to the assignment, okay? So you're not gonna be turning in this. You still have to do this. You still have to make sure you understand this, so when we get to the assignment, you're ready for it, okay? That's why we did some transitions things together, and then I was like, okay, scrap those, let's make some actual good transitions, because the next ones are gonna be better, all right? So this is a warm-up, a primer, basically, for you to get used to using 3D for the rest of it, okay? Now, the next part of this that I want to show is bringing stuff in from Illustrator, okay? So in Illustrator, you may not have known this, but when you make a new document, you can choose video and film. When I choose video and film, I can choose from an array of different settings. I'm going to go to the HD TV 1080. That's the size of our comp that we're dealing with inside of After Effects. I'm also going to make sure under my advanced that this transparency grid, which shouldn't even be there, is off. There we go. Okay. So now we get this document. This document is the exact size of our After Effects comp. So when we create something, if I made a rectangle exactly the size of this comp or this file, it would come into After Effects and be fitted perfectly. Okay? That's what you want. If I made something, this is what people usually do, they make a portrait document, they bring it into After Effects and realize, hey, this doesn't work, right? I spent 6 hours lining up everything perfectly in portrait. I bring in After Effects and either the top is cut off or the bottom's cut off or both are cut off. So you always want to set up your sources so that they make sense when you go into After Effects, all right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a box here. And After Effects has a bunch of cool tools. We're only going to be using After Effects more and more, so if you're not comfortable with After Effects, this is a good time to say, I'm not comfortable with it. I need to start learning and doing more tutorials and playing around with it more. I'm going to round the edges, so I'm just going to click and drag on this a little bit. There we go. So now I have a little round edge box there. I'm going to take that up to maybe 8, 9. There we go. I'm going to put some text in here. I'm going to make the text huge. And one thing I always do, I always make the text box way too big. Oops. All right. Yeah. There we go. Why wasn't going in? All right. So there's my test text. Okay, so what I want to do is instead of having, I think I had a button clicked, that's why. Instead of having these here, what I want to do is I want to have that thing from Illustrator, okay? And the reason for that is because if you've played with Illustrator, you know that Illustrator has a lot more illustration tools than After Effects does. So it makes sense that when we do illustrations, we do them in Illustrator, then we bring them into After Effects. So this workflow between the two softwares, we want to iron out. So again, this is a good assignment to iron out not only your 3D, but your Illustrator to After Effects stuff, okay? Now anything you do inside here can go into After Effects, okay? Within reason, I think there's a couple advanced things that might have some tricks to them, but for the most part, everything we're gonna do can. So I'm gonna take this, yep, see now it's moving, what I was doing before. I'm gonna take this and duplicate it and scoot it down. There we go. And I'll duplicate it again. I'll duplicate it again. So even just that, let me just delete that. Even just this little thing is, as I move it down, see how it's lining things up? And it automatically, it should. There we go. Match the sizing or the spacing of that. I'm trying to snap onto something else there. All right, so I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna resize everything to shrink to fit. There we go, cool. All right, so now I wanna take this inside into After Effects. All right, so I'm just gonna save it as regular, just like we're seeing it. There, work. And this will be 3D AE. And make a new folder called Artwork, Sign 01. Okay, so I'm saving this as my Sign 01. I'm going to bring it into After Effects. So I just double click. So I just double click anywhere in here. I find my footage. There it is. Okay. Now After Effects is going to ask me, how do you want to bring this in? Is it a piece of footage? Meaning, is it flat? Is what you've drawn just a flat piece of artwork you want to drop in as a flat piece of artwork? Or do you want to use it as a composition? Meaning that it's going to read my layers from Illustrator and actually create layers inside of After Effects. Okay? So if I do it as footage, just so we can see it, and then I drop this down, you'll see that I get all these pieces. Now I can't manipulate any of those. Okay? I can do whatever I do to it, it does it to all of them because all those pieces are essentially the same. So that's not what I want, so I'm going to delete that. If I go here and I say input as a composition, you'll see that I get the layers and I get a composition called Sign 01. So I double click this, it shows me that. Now this is all my layers. I only have one layer in Illustrator. I didn't make separate layers. So I need to make separate layers in order for this thing to even have really a difference in what I'm trying to show. So I'm going to go to my layers palette. And I'm going to do it the long way, which is make a new layer, drag the little dot to the new layer, grab this, make a new layer, drag the dot to the new layer, grab this, make a new layer, drag the dot. We'll get further into here just to do other ways, faster ways to do this. And of course I move my layer 1 to the top. See, I like to make sure they're in order. Okay, so now I'm going to save this again. Go back to After Effects, grab it, composition, import. Okay, so now I double click here and you'll see that it brought in each one of my layers as a separate piece. So now I can animate each one of those. So you remember from your Illustrator class how you did those gradient meshes, 1,000 layers inside of Illustrator, all those different things? Well, you could import that into After Effects and you could do what's called a build up where you're showing, here's my first layer built up to my end product. So it's a good way to kind of show off how you built something inside of After Effects or inside of Illustrator. Okay, so now these are just regular objects. So I could go in here and I could go to their pivot tool. Oops, one at a time. And I could move the pivot to this corner. Come on. And go to the next one and move the pivot. And go to the next one and move the pivot. Go to the next one. And go to the next one. There it is. Okay. So now I have all of these with their pivots moved. I'm going to make them 3D layers. I go to rotate, and you'll see if I go to my X rotation, how now they're all rotating just like my signs were before. Okay. And I could even jump into here. And I'm going to steal this animation. So I'm going to click on my X rotation and paste. Now because I had all the layers selected and I hit R to open up the rotation, it opens all of them. Because I copied the animation from the other one and I went in here, I made a 3D layer, I had all these selected, and made all of them that. I clicked on that, I pasted them in, it pasted on all of them. Okay? So there are ways to make things a lot more efficient than doing them one at a time. Okay? I always look at the big picture of, we're doing it to 5 items, what if we had 50 or 100 or 200? You know, what's the best way to do it? So now if we look at this, we get that. And then I'm just going to go in here and parent these. So again, 5 is going to be parented to 4, 4 to 3, 3 to 2, 2 to 1. Okay, and then I do my little offset trick. Okay, and you'll see there it was kind of wonky, like it rotated really weird. So let's go back here, let's go back here, let's go back to this. And look, I waited too many frames between these two. This should be like 2 frames. And you'll see how I do that. I just go here and I go right there. Okay. Much better. Okay. Now you'll also notice something too, that when I did all my parenting for this, I went past all the animation when they were all laying out like that. That's very important that I do it like that. If I go here, let me set all these to none. Okay, so now there's no parenting, so everything's back to where it was originally. If I rewind it all the way and then I do my parenting, this is going to behave very weird. Okay, when we do our parenting, we have to do it at a very specific spot. All right, parenting is very much like I equate it to like driving in the car. Okay, Dad's driving the car, whoever's in the car gets to go along with him. But if Dad starts driving and then we parent someone to the car, they're dragging behind it. That's what's happening. All right, so we have to make sure we do it at the right spot. So let me go back to the beginning, turn all of these back to off. Go past the animation, and then parent things in. And now we're back to that. Okay. Now, watch too how easy this is. I go back to Illustrator, and I say, I don't want this to say test 1. I want this to say pizza. I want this to say, come on, burrito. Not in my house. I like lots of food, but I just don't like burritos. I don't like Mexican food. I don't know what it is. I like pasta. Hamburger. Hot dog. All right, and then you get the idea. We can add other stuff. So I'm just going to save it exactly as it is. I go back into After Effects. Boom. They've changed. They've updated. Okay? So we've created a link between what we're doing inside of Illustrator and what we're doing inside of After Effects. If you watch any of those videos that you see motion graphic stuff, 90% of the stuff that they're doing has been drawn in Illustrator first, comped out, whatever, laid out exactly how they want it, and then they bring it into After Effects to do all the animation. If this plays nicely, this is the starting point. So what I want you to do is I want you to create that. Basically, okay, create one sign that just does the flipping. Once you understand the concept of using Illustrator, bringing it into After Effects, animating with 3D layers, and then linking them together so that they make sense, then we can go on to the actual assignment. But we can't do that until you do. Okay? So next class, what I'm going to show is that next part of this. Okay? This shouldn't take you too long just to be able to create some stuff and make it 3D. Oops. And then do something like that. Okay? Then once we do this stuff, then we'll understand further how we can take this and apply it to more of what those other examples we saw. Okay? All right.